Hello and welcome to the Cheeky Science Show. So the plan for this video was to review this book, Why We Sleep, but unfortunately I've only got about halfway through it so far. I mean, I am a slow reader, but I'm not gonna lie, I keep falling asleep whenever I try to read it. So I've already learned so much anyway, so I felt obliged to share with you some of the nuggets of knowledge that I've already learned. And mainly in this video we're going to focus on sleep and the relationship to weight loss, mainly because it's the chapter that I've just read and it's pretty interesting. So hopefully by the end of this video you'll be able to understand this graph here a bit better and the relationship between the amount of sleep and weight loss or weight gain. So I think there's a bit of a myth out there that if you sleep for a shorter period of time, such that you're awake for longer, you have the opportunity to burn more calories and therefore you're more likely to lose weight than if you sleep more. Well, obviously, if you were going to run a marathon instead of sleeping, well, firstly, congrats. A marathon is quite an achievement, but also, yes, you would lose more weight than if you decided to sleep. But the evidence we have now is to kind of show that that just really isn't the case, and that the less you sleep, the more likely you are to eat. But as we'll see, it's not just about the amount of food that you eat, it's also how the body responds to the food that you eat and what foods that it craves in the first place. So what evidence do we have for this? Well, there's been numerous studies that have tried to investigate this relationship, and so one example that's given in the book is they had a group of healthy adults and they slept for 4 hours for 6 nights, and at the end of it they were 40% less effective at absorbing a standard dose of glucose. And so this effectively has caused these healthy adults to go into a pre-diabetic state. Now, whilst this is already quite an alarming statistic, to make matters worse, when you're tired, you tend to eat more as well, and that's partly due to the change in two very important hormones that are controlling your hunger and your appetite. And so these two hormones are leptin and ghrelin. So when you feel full up, you'll have higher levels of leptin in your body, whereas when you feel hungry, you'll have higher levels of ghrelin. But the problem is, when you're sleep deprived, what happens is that the levels of leptin, which would normally stimulate and tell your body that you feel full, actually decreases, and what happens is you see an increase in the levels of ghrelin, which make you feel hungry. And so these two hormones have partially antagonizing roles within the body, and if you want to know more about the genetics and the biochemical basis to this, I have a previous video on it already. So how does this relate to weight gain or weight loss? Well, it comes down to a simple equation of energy in versus energy out. If you've got more energy coming in than coming out, then it will result in weight gain. And so we've already seen that being sleep deprived increases your calorie intake. But not only does it increase your intake, but you may also see a decline in your energy expenditure. And that partly comes from the fact that you become more lethargic when you are sleep deprived, and so maybe you could do that marathon on your first night, but if you wanted to do that every night, it just wouldn't be the case. I just have to point out here as well that I have no idea what I've drawn up in that little left-hand corner there. It kind of looks like a cloud with a McDonald's logo in it, or a lightning strike. Clearly not a very good artist. Hang on, no, I've got it. I think it means a perfect storm. Yes, it means a perfect storm of the fact that you've got the increase in expenditure and increase intake, decrease expenditure. Anyway, adding to this perfect storm is the fact that you also see changes in brain activity when you have an individual that is sleep deprived. So what they did in this study is they took, again, some healthy average weight participants, and they showed them a number of cards of different food images ranging from fruit and veg to more unhealthy snacks such as ice cream, pasta and donuts. Actually, pasta's quite healthy. Well, anyway. And so whilst they did this, they looked at the brain activity of the participants. And what they saw was that in the sleep deprived group, they saw that there would normally be high activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is part of the brain for thoughtful judgment and controlled decision making. It was silenced when they lacked sleep, and instead they saw an activated primal deep brain structures. And so what this led to was high calorie food becoming more desirable to those who felt sleep deprived. So if we go back to the graph that I introduced at the start of this video, which I've also just taken straight from the book. What's been plotted on this graph is literally the average amount of sleep that has been recorded for the past 50 years, and also the percentage of obese individuals in the US over the same time period. And you can see the observed trends or correlation that as the average sleep amount has declined, there's been a corresponding increase in the percentage of obese individuals. Now, whilst this is just a correlation, and correlation doesn't always mean causation, it's still pretty remarkable to see it plotted like this. And as we've seen from the studies as well, there does seem to be a lot of evidence supporting a link between the two. And I haven't even finished yet, because later on in this chapter it goes on to show that this link also extends to children as well. And so one study saw that 3-year-olds who sleep less than 10.5 hours a night had a 45% increased risk of obesity by age 7. And just one final study that I'll share with you just to end off this video is they took a group of overweight men and women, and all of them were on a low-calorie diet for 2 weeks, but one group were allowed to sleep 5.5 hours per night, whilst the other were allowed 8.5 hours per night. So both of the groups lost weight through the dieting, but remarkably what they saw was the group that only slept 5.5 hours, more than 70% of their weight loss came from lean body mass, which is muscle, not fat, whilst for the group who slept 8.5 hours, more than 50% of the weight loss came from fat, which is the ideal situation for weight loss. So as we go back to this graph, I'll just summarise that what we've seen is that if you have short sleep, not only does your hunger and appetite increase, you also compromise the impulse control and your cravings, and therefore increase food consumption, and you also prevent effective weight loss. So hopefully you've learnt something, and I promise I'll do a review on this book when I finish it, and as always, thanks for listening.